I think that people forget that I'm a person outside Twitter.
Yeah.
Like, I don't exist on Twitter only. All my confrontations are only on Twitter and in social media and in the public domain.
Okay.
I'm a very, very non-confrontational person in my life. It's just this. It's this person who can't get up in the morning, who's late for interviews, and who's often in trouble with her parents. But I think all in all deserves to be forgiven because her heart is in the right place. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what else to say.
Thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you.
Where do you get your energy from, Swara?
This is a good place to plug like a soft drink or something. I'm just hyper energetic. I really am hyper. I've always been a very hyper kid. My parents used to be tearing their hair out at how to keep this child engaged. Both my brother and I are actually very hyper energetic children.
Okay.
And I'm a working breed.
Okay.
You know, like I need to be constantly engaged. And if I don't have work, I can max have nothing to do for like maybe 10 days, 2 weeks.
Okay.
Max. After that, I'm like, I need to do something. So I'll organize a protest.
So, I've of course gone through a lot of your posts and your tweets over the years and in our research, and I feel like, and this is something I want to ask you because you're such a vocal voice, and this is something all of us are tackling, right? We're tackling polarized versions, we are tackling a post-truth world where everybody has their own version of facts. Do you often feel like the way the way you criticize an issue or the way you tweet about something or the way you put a video out about something, that is only contributing to further polarization? Or are you aware that maybe, you should still try to maintain a certain kind of objectivity or try very hard to be neutral, not use certain terms that could trigger people from the other spectrum, of course?
I think we've gone past neutral. There is nothing called neutral anymore, right? It's not my responsibility as a private citizen
Right.
to ensure that public discourse remains, I mean, I can't control it. I can't control the direction public discourse takes.
Right.
But the person who can control it are the people in power. So when those who hold public office and political office, but people who hold public office, when they continue to follow Twitter handles that are eve-teasing women, harassing women, abusing women, using sexual slurs, using filthy abuse, when they continue to follow such handles, then you're basically shaping public discourse, and that is how polarization is being contributed to. The people that I'm challenging, so-called, or the ideology that I'm challenging, is the ideology in power. It should be triggered. They deserve to be triggered. How else is a normal citizen going to register their protest? How do I reach out to the powers
You
that
trigger to what end? Then what eventually happens?
shouldn't they, the people in power, realize that not everybody in the country thinks like them? That not everyone is offended by some silly scene in a
Yeah.
web series,
Yeah.
right?
Of course.
Shouldn't, and at some level, it's to call out the, excuse my language, you can beep it out, but it's to call out the bullshit. I mean, you're telling me that we're now in 2021 in a state where on the 30th of January, people celebrate Nathuram Godse. And I should be worried about triggering their feelings? Of course, their feelings deserve to be triggered, and I'm being generous here. There's a lot more that they deserve. All right, triggering them on the internet is like the smallest of the problems here.
Who is the regular person behind this vocal person we see on Twitter and on television?
I think that people forget that I'm a person outside Twitter.
Yeah.
Like, I don't exist on Twitter only.
Yeah.
Like, I don't live in Twitter and exist on Twitter. Like,
Yeah.
I'm a person, I have a family,
Yeah.
my parents, my brothers, my sister-in-law, my friends, my dog. I have a house, where I have a home. I have aspirations that are normal, like normal people, and I'm just a regular person as well. And I think that sometimes that thing people forget. It's just this. It's this person who can't get up in the morning, who's late for interviews, and who's often in trouble with her parents, a little impulsive, and sometimes a little too effusive with her emotions. perhaps. But I think all in all deserves to be forgiven because her heart is in the right place. I mean, I don't know what else to say.
Are you hoping someone sees this
Yeah.
interview and
Hi guys, I'm sorry if I ever triggered you with my tweets.
looking back, do you have like regrets about times when you must have said something or done something and you wish you hadn't done it, or do you
I'm-
carry regrets?
I'm actually, no, I don't actually.
Okay.
And also, I do have to say that all my confrontations are only on Twitter and in social media and in the public domain.
Okay.
I'm a very, very non-confrontational person in my life. Like, I think the only people I fight with are my parents, my brother, and my boyfriend.
Okay.
Like, that's it. I don't, there are very few, maybe I've had 2 fights with friends who are my best friends in my entire life.
Oh.
I do not normally get into confrontational
So you don't speak
situations.
your mind out or
No,
whatever?
I do, but I'm a very diplomatic person. I know it doesn't seem like that, but in real life, I'm actually an extremely diplomatic person, and I have a few people in my life who are who are from the exact opposite ideology to what I
Yeah, and how do you deal
believe.
with
And
that?
I just try to keep talking to them in a rational way. I mean, most of them I trust are decent people who are, I don't know, misled or whatever the hell. But I try very hard to. I'm always working on myself to remain an empathetic person in life, because I know that it's hard to it's hard on social media to kind of always have that. But I feel like in life, in real life interactions, it's so important to just be able to find the human being in yourself and in the other person.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, I mean, I do, like, I have had confrontations on issue-based confrontation, like on sets and stuff. But otherwise, I'm not a big fighter at all. And actually, some of my very close friends and like family have often say to me that, don't be a pocha. Like, you don't have to be such. I know it's bizarre. Like, nobody believes that. Like, that one of the problems with me could be that in my personal relationships I could be a pushover.
Yeah.
I know it's hard to believe, but like, yeah. So I've
Wow.
I have 2 lives.
Yeah.
And like 2 personalities, it seems. Yeah.
But you know what you said about when you're talking to people and you look for that empathetic strain and that relatability, right? Because if you stop relating to people, then there's no conversation.
Yeah.
Which is why I asked you about Twitter. I mean, like, is that relatability something that you're saying you're diplomatic in real life, but on Twitter, you're not. You call it,
But I
call a
am not
spade a
interested
spade.
in engaging with people on Twitter, because as far as my Twitter is concerned, a lot of them are bots, a lot of them are paid trolls, and a lot of the blue tick verified trolls are like, people with like proper Sangh agenda on their sleeves. How do I talk to a person who's making money off hate?
Okay, cool. What was your first job?
My first job actually was, my first part-time job was at this NGO in Delhi called the Aman Trust.
Okay.
And I was paid a very handsome sum of 7,000 rupees a month, which was at that time a lot of money,
Okay.
because I lived at home and I had no expenses.
Sure.
So I blew up all my salary for the first 3 months on buying gifts for everyone I knew. Like, every single person I knew, from the Mali to the cook to the parents to the friends, everyone was getting gifts.
What did you do at the Aman Trust, by the way, in Delhi?
I was a researcher.
You were the
I was
researcher.
an intern kind of thing.
Okay.
So we were working on some projects on looking at conflict resolution and peace initiatives in local communities. But yeah, my first job in Bombay was actually as a copy editor, and this would interest you as a journalist, at the EPW, which is the Economic and Political Weekly.
Interesting.
It was a part-time job. I
Okay.
didn't have a desk because I had no space. So I would sit at whoever was absent. I would get to sit at their desk,
All right.
and I was paid 30 paise a word.
Okay.
So my challenge was to copy edit as many articles as I could in the month.
Wow.
And I remember that my first salary was 6,566 or something like that rupees, or 67 rupees or whatever. And my rent was like 5,500 went in my rent. So then I had like $1,000 left.
Yeah.
So I called up my father and I said, "Oh, Papa, paise de do. Mama, paise de do."
So you've always been someone who's extremely aware then. I mean, considering your experiences right from your first job.
Yeah, I've always known what's happening in the world. I mean, I remember that in 2002, when the Gujarat riots happened, and I think we were in school. I went with a group of us, went to volunteer
Okay.
in the relief camps.
Okay.
And we were these we were these little brats, and a lot of we were the youngest people there, and the people were like, "What are you guys doing here?" And we were like, "We've come to help." And they were like, "What the hell?" And then we're like, "Koi kaam hai?" So they'd make us fill out these forms, and actually I went into a lot of the colonies that were sort of affected during the riots. A lot of the colonies that had been burnt. I saw houses that were burnt. I spoke to a lot
How
of riot
old were you?
victims. I must have been 17. Just finishing school, I think. Yeah. And 16 maybe. I can't remember if it was my 10th board or it was my 12th board that had just finished. I went in June.
Right.
So the riots had happened, like, the relief camps had been set up.
Yeah.
I was working
And it was your idea to go?
Me and a few friends, we were like, we should do this. Good summer holiday plan. But luckily, like, a lot of the people who were going there were some very well-known citizens. Like Harsh Mandar was one of the people who'd organized it. It was under a banner called Aman Ekta Manch. And I was very like impassioned and moved by that whole thing. That
Sure.
image of that Gujarat, that guy, holding his hands, which is on every newspaper in the
Yeah.
country.
Yeah.
That image just changed my life.
Okay.
Like, I just saw that and I was like, I just saw it and I remember I was just bawling. I was like to my parents, I was like, why is this happening? What is this? Like, because I was old enough, we were studying, we were in history class, we were studying about the partition, we were studying about, like, the Indian freedom movement. So I knew the big themes of, communalism, Hindu-Muslim relations, violence, riots. I had some sense of that. And that
Right.
made a very, very big, I feel like that really shaped the person I would become. Yeah.
Was there a turning point where you decided to be so vocal about your opinions?
I don't think that it was a conscious decision on my part to be a certain way. I think that I have always been a political person because of the background I come from, because of the education I've had. My parents are both scholars in their own way. My mom's an academic. My dad's retired, is a strategic analyst, retired from the Navy. I've grown up in this very sort of, academic Delhi sort of world.
Right.
I went to Sardar Patel, then I went to Miranda House. We had a very political, feminist, progressive sort of department of teachers that always encouraged us to sort of learn beyond the classroom, be involved with the world.
Right.
When I came to JNU for my master's, I got involved with IPTA, which is the Indian People's Theatre Association. We had a chapter in JNU. So it's a students group, an amateur theatre group, but like, very much concerned with issues and what's happening. And I was never very how should I say, I was never very cautious about my views. I've always been a fairly sort of straightforward person. And
Right.
Something people don't know, and I know that I'm famous for open letters in Bollywood, but what I think a lot of people don't know is that my first open letter was actually to Anurag Kashyap.
Okay.
In the form of a comment on some blog that they had at that point called the Fight Club or something, I can't
Okay.
remember. And over some very like personal sort of issue, a fight of two
online
people.
even today?
It's probably online even today. And
Okay, we're
Anurag
gonna look at it.
was taking sides for someone. I was taking side for someone else.
Okay.
Like literally an individual thing. And I'd written this long letter, and people were like, "What is wrong with you?" It was like literally my first or second year in Bollywood.
Right.
I was struggling as an actor. I
What
had not
year
had
is
a
this?
single release. I can't remember. It was before Tanu As Manu released.
Right.
So it must have been 2009 or 10. I can't remember.
Right.
And so I was always this person.
Right.
And I think what changed was India. Our polity, our public discourse, our government. I think that post 2014, we've seen a real shift in sort of, and all of us have felt it, right? Was it ever were you ever before 2014 worried about what you said about the government? Did it ever? It was like second nature criticizing the government. So I think that's what changed. I think that post 2014, having an opinion has become a controversial thing.
Right.
It's bizarre. It's the most normal thing is to have an opinion on what is happening around you.
You have days where you break down and where you feel deeply sad.
Yeah, I have days of deep dejection at what is happening around us. Like I remember the day that Munawwar was denied bail by the High Court. I was like, what is this? What is happening to us? Like, what have we become? Like, what have our institutions become?
So what, when something like this happens, can you help yourself from going on Twitter, or do you like keep your phone away and get
No,
like
I
really
do
feel
try and
bad,
tweet
or
because
what?
no, I do try and tweet. You know, the thing is that what's also happened is that I now feel that I'm part of a team, you know,
Right.
of people who are trying to resist the hate that is taking over our country.
Right.
You know, I feel I'm part of a team of people that is like trying to like, you know, resist the sort of discourse of hatred that has become normalized in our country. So I feel like I'd be letting someone down or people down if I didn't now speak up, because like so many people have now over the last few years told me that, you know, you say things we can't, and thank you for that. And maybe I've taken that too seriously, I don't know.
So there's a sense of responsibility.
Yeah, there is a sense of responsibility,
Yeah.
and I feel that that's there are a lot of days when I'm like, why am I on this? You know, it's a time waste. It's like it fills your brain with negative energies and negative thoughts. Like, why am I even on it? Like, I
Yeah.
should just delete my account, and then I'm never able to do it because I just feel like, you know, like it's the good fight. Like, I don't want to give it up.
Have you had cases of stalking or threats? I mean, not only online, but has it gotten very, very hectic and serious?
So the thing is, it's very odd with me. I don't read comments
Okay.
normally,
Okay.
and I don't.
Your fans will feel really
I'm
bad
sorry,
right
yeah, I
now.
know, but well, the thing is that like I see things because oftentimes multiple people are tagged.
Right.
So it does sometimes if I'm following some of those people, it does show up on my timeline. But otherwise,
Right.
I don't read comments, and I only read comments when I've had a release.
Okay.
To see what people are actually saying, actual viewers are saying.
Right.
But otherwise, I don't read comments and I don't answer the phone. I'm sorry.
Who answers your phone
I don't know.
then?
This is like a bad tactic, I feel. But I basically don't answer the phone from unlisted numbers, and I
Okay.
don't really look at messages unless they are from people who have been saved. My phones are off. I mean, I have one number that's personal, but the other number, which is probably accessible to everybody, is with my team. So they also look at it. So I have tried to sort of insulate myself from any active threat. But yeah, of course, like, I mean, it depends, you know, sometimes it depends on Twitter controversy to Twitter controversy, you know. So, like, one tweet will go viral with the right wing, then they'll get very angry. They'll say, but I feel like now me and the right wing on ecosystem on Twitter has like we have our own abusive toxic relationship, you know.
Okay.
Like, we know how it works.
What does
I'll
that
say
mean?
something.
What is this abusive
Like,
toxic
I know, you know, I know I'll say something. I pretty much know which tweets will trigger them, will get viral, will be picked up.
Right.
I feel that of my 1.3 or 4 million followers, whatever it is on Twitter, I feel like more than 70% are actually like right wingers. I don't know why they want to follow me and know what I'm saying. You know, then that cycle will go on. Then they'll like write horrible things. They'll make memes, whatever. It's a 2-day cycle. It'll finish. It'll die down. And you know,
So
in that cycle,
you're thick-skinned about all of this.
yeah. Now I've
It's
gotten
water off
used
your
to
back.
it. Now, I mean, it's not nice, but I've gotten used to it.
Right. What about all these PILs that are filed and cases and complaints that are filed against you? So how do you deal with that? Like, just like you have a process to deal with the trolls, what is your process to deal with these complaints?
My process is to have had to hire lawyers, like criminal lawyers. So now I also hang out with lawyers, lots of them. But I mean, the first time it happened, I think that was the time. I think that was when people around me got really worried, and I got quite worried because I mean, one doesn't want to go to jail, like, you know. But I did. I was like, there must be a process to deal with this. So I spoke to a couple of, you know, lawyers and looked at whatever were the best options. Where we had to file replies. We did file those replies. Some of them were criminal defamation notices, which are generally, you know, kind of just a means to intimidate and harass. We filed replies on that. A couple of, but I've actually been lucky because the 2-3 big ones, like I got named in a couple of FIRs that were in relation to the Delhi riots and accusing me and my speeches of inciting the riots, which is a very serious, though completely inaccurate charge.
Right.
But luckily for me, you know, they were these complicated sort of FIRs that had in addendum the names of also of Kapil Mishra, and you know how when lots of people file the same kind of a PIL-ish thing or an FIR, then
clubbed
they
into
get
one.
clubbed together.
Yeah.
So I think in trying to let Kapil Mishra not follow up that, our cases have sort of, I don't know, they've kind of gone, they've kind of been stalled. And then, of course, there was the big other serious one was the contempt of court case. And that, luckily, the Honorable Attorney General did found that there was nothing really contemptuous in my tweets.
Right.
Or it
But
was
are
not
you
a tweet,
worried?
it was a speech.
But considering all of this, are you worried? Like, are you a little bit more like, do you see your tweet twice before publishing it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not looking to go to jail, you know, and I'm
Right.
not looking to like land in trouble.
Yeah.
So it's amazing to me that regular private citizens have like been criminalized in this manner that you are now having to consult with lawyers before you tweet. Like it's mad.
You have to consult. You do
Sometimes
that?
I send my tweet to my lawyer being like, is this seditious? Is this contempt of court?
And
Is
have they
this?
said no? Don't do this.
Sometimes they've said, yeah, this could be used as this. Sometimes they've said, look, it's not, but just avoid. Like it's
And you listen.
a daily negotiation. Yeah, sometimes I listen. Sometimes I mean, I think that you know, the Twitter is such a place. It's like Twitter is like that video game war that is just going on 24/7.
Okay. And you don't seem to be getting overwhelmed by it though.
I just pick my battles. Like I know when to like come in, like fire a couple of salvos.
Do you have a world? Now tell us of your world outside of Twitter. Let's leave Twitter alone for a bit.
Yeah, please.
Like, do you have a happy place outside of Twitter? Do you
Yeah.
have friends? Do you? I mean, tell us.
I have a great life. Touch wood. I'm sorry. Like I have a lovely, wonderful life. Very wholesome, fulfilling, engaging life outside Twitter. Yeah, I'm been. You know, I have now been based between Delhi and Bombay
Okay.
ever since the pandemic because I came back to my parents to
Right.
Delhi.
Yeah.
During the pandemic.
Do you like
And
Delhi?
I love Delhi. I'm
Okay.
a 100% Delhi girl.
Okay.
I'm born, brought up, studied everything in Delhi. Like
Yeah.
I was in my early 20s when I moved to Bombay. So
Right.
it's very weird. Bombay is like my workplace. So
Right.
the whole city is like, for me, is work. It's like the office. And I can't imagine working anywhere else. Like in terms of being based out of, I couldn't be based anywhere else for work.
Right.
But Delhi for me is home. I live with my parents in Delhi in
Yeah.
their house.
How is it living
Um,
with your parents
it's-
because of the pandemic?
It's like after 11 years or 12 years of living alone, I've come back and it's amazing.
You-
I love it. I love it. My parents and I'm very lucky. My parents are very amazing, wonderful people who just leave me alone, let me do what I want. They've
Okay.
been very liberal with me always. I'm very close to them. So I have a very friendly equation with them. I tell them everything. The only thing they're always worried about is that don't be driving alone at night.
Okay.
That's their only condition to me, that if you're going out and you're going to be back after 10 o'clock, then somebody has to escort you back. Like,
that doesn't
you should-
bother you a little bit?
I mean, I get
Yeah.
I get it. And so I have wonderful parents, I have a great, very supportive family, very supportive friends. Most of my closest friends are my school friends. So I'm still in touch with all my school friends and a few of them from college.
Right.
That's like this is the world that grounds me, keeps me real. They're all very candid. None of them have any of they don't balk at all at calling a spade as far as I'm concerned, telling me when I'm being an ass, pointing out when I'm making a mistake. And what is the other thing? I have a dog, I have a cat. I love animals. And oh yeah, here's something actually that maybe Twitter should know more about, or the world, social media world should know more about,
Please tell
which
us.
is that I have ever since the pandemic, somehow I have had a very active animal rescuing life.
Okay.
So I've been like I keep finding sick animals, hurt animals on the street here, there, and a variety of species, like from a like cheel or a barge ka baby to like dogs and cats. So I have this whole animal network that I
That's nice.
shelters and whatever. So that's also a whole aspect of my life.